This is Autoline After Hours, unscripted, uncensored, unapproved. Are you a podcast kind of person? Then look for Autoline After Hours, wherever you go for your favorite podcast.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first Autoline After Hours of 2023. You just heard John's voice. John is not here today. He is in Las Vegas at the CES extravaganza, which I'm sure we'll be touching on during the show. And so I have put together a group of people who have extreme knowledge of the auto industry. So let's bring them in. Okay, here we all are. So we have Jenny Newman of Cars.com, editor-in-chief, Sam Fiorani, who is the global vehicle forecasting vice president at the organization, and we have Brett Smith of the Center for Automotive Research, who is the director of technology there. So briefly, let's start with you, Jenny. Tell us what Cars.com is and why people ought to go look at Cars.com.
Cars.com, we're an automotive marketplace, and what we do is we connect dealers and their inventory with shoppers. And we offer not only those listings, but we also have a lot of great tools, including helping shoppers finance. We have editorial content, which is the team that I'm proud to lead. And, we're basically a really great tool as you start your shopping journey all the way to the end where you purchase your car.
Okay, great. Sam.
Yeah, I'm with AutoForecast Solutions, and we provide data and analytics to the auto industry. Anyone who's looking for where the industry is going, where it's been, why it's going that direction, that's our job, to provide a little color to the industry.
And last but not least, Brett.
Good afternoon, Gary. Center for Automotive Research, or CAR, is a not-for-profit research group in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are independent research on the automotive industry, on technologies, and all other parts of the industry, from vehicle manufacturing back through supply chain and even some days on to the sales side.
So as you all can see, that I've got a product specialist, I've got a couple of industry specialists, technology specialists. I mean, so we've got it all covered. So, okay, let's start with product. Although, so 2023 is very fresh. We haven't seen much in the way of new product being introduced yet. So Jenny, was there any vehicle introduced in 2022 that, you think set a new bar for the industry that people just have to try to compete with? Or was it just a year of, there were some new vehicles and they're fine?
I think there are a couple notable standouts. The first I would say is more of a group of automakers, right? So Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, and of course they are siblings. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 coming out, I will put it out there, I own one. So I have my own bias, and I actually put my own money where my mouth is here, but I think that's a really significant vehicle, and it set the stage for, a true competitor to some of Tesla's products. We always hear every time an EV comes out, the headline on every vehicle, it seems like, is Tesla killer, aimed at Tesla. This one, I think, is definitely doing a little damage to Tesla, perhaps. And with it comes the EV6 from Kia. And then, of course, Genesis has their own approach to EVs, but, same family, where they have, they're starting to put out EVs on their platform or in their lineup, but also tying it in with a gas-powered engine, which is a really interesting way to go. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening from the Korean automaker first. Secondly, I would say EV pickup trucks or electric pickup trucks. So in 2022, Ford came out with the F-150 Lightning. Tons and tons of interest around that, right? Really interesting to take this really best-selling nameplate and electrify it. And then what we're going to see this year, or later this year, of course, is more EV or more electric trucks coming out, which is really exciting. They're coming out from the big automakers. It's going to be interesting to see how many people jump in And then also sort of the trade-offs that you make, for instance, if you're using this as more of a work truck or you're towing, things like that. So I think those are two areas that I thought were really interesting from 2022.
Yeah, let's look at those two things separately here. I mean, so the whole Hyundai, Kia, Genesis triumvirate, what you're saying is that, yeah, I mean, like, so the EV6 is a finalist for the NACTOY Utility of the Year award. I mean, it's just quite amazing. The Ioniq 5 that you're talking about, the same platform. What was it? Genesis GV70, I think. And I just had a G80 electrified, which is the normal, as you're saying, it's the gasoline vehicle that is electric. And I mean, it's just amazing how transparent it is. So Sam, I mean, Kia and Hyundai, I mean, they're really making some strides. What do you account for this?
Well, they have a really good design. They've spent the last 20 or 30 years upping their quality. So their quality is cutting edge now. They've hit a lot of the quality surveys really high over the last few years. And their dealer network has built to the point where you can go into a Hyundai or Kia dealer and definitely a Genesis dealer and get really good service. So the combination of all these things coming together, where a lot of the other manufacturers have either dropped the ball or just rested on their laurels. Kia and Hyundai had a lot to prove, and they've done the last 20 years pushing that up to the level they're at now.
Gary, I think Sam and Jenny both picked a real winner there. It's remarkable what Kia has done with their image, their willingness to take a step away from traditional design. Their vehicles look different. They look EV-like, but they don't look crazy EV-like. And it's been really fun to watch a company that seems to be almost on the starting gate hit something really spectacular.
Yeah, it's quite a phenomenon, and it makes you think. As you say, Jenny, they're taking market away, perhaps incrementally from Tesla, but I mean, certainly, I think is a familiarity with their vehicles when people get in their vehicles and see what they're offering. I mean, so the Genesis even offers facial recognition, so you don't need to even have your key fob with you. And I asked a Genesis representative, like, why the heck would you want that? And he says, well, I run, and so when I go running, I don't like to have to carry around a heavy key fob, because the Genesis key fobs tend to be rather on the heavy side, because they want to show you that you're buying something that's luxury. And so he says, it's so great, I can just use my face, and he never leaves it at home. He always has it with him. Anyway.
I think too, one of the things that really stands out when it comes to the Hyundai and the Kia and even the Genesis offerings are accessible technology, right? So a lot of shoppers are moving from gas-powered vehicles into EVs, or they're certainly really interested in EVs. And with the Tesla, that's a very different setup for a lot of people. And there's some people jump right in, right, with that giant screen and just getting used to, thinking about where to put your eyes, how you're going to track your, how fast you're going, that sort of thing. The Hyundai Kia's approach is a little more accessible. It seems like a bridge between, the approach that a lot of people have been comfortable with for the last, oh my God, how many years now? A long, long time. And where we're going in the future, and how more and more technology is integrating into the way that we drive our vehicles. So I do think that might have a little something to do with it. And you're right, of course, the design is really standout. I had the chance to see and drive the Ioniq 6 from Hyundai. Again, stunning, just absolutely stunning. The vehicle is beautiful, and it really turns your head. There's something to be said for that when you're buying an EV.
Mm-hmm. So Sam, one manufacturer, a new manufacturer that builds two vehicles, an SUV and a truck, going back to the electric truck thing, Rivian. So, when numbers were being reported over the last few days, it was reported that Rivian built 24,337 vehicles, and they had projected they would make 25,000 vehicles. And there was like this complete and total uproar about how they missed their number. Okay. So they missed their number by 2%. You track numbers. Is this important, or is this just basically people who don't understand the car industry making much ado about nothing?
Yes, on all those things. So that Tesla has set the stage where their numbers have always been more spectacular than they expected, and so they've laid the groundwork for everybody to follow and outdo what they've said. It doesn't matter that Rivian said they were going to build 50,000, and then they said they were going to build 25,000, and then they just missed the 25,000. It's a different market than it was when Tesla started. And when Tesla started more than a dozen years ago, the market was growing, the economy was growing, everything was going in the positive direction. And it's only been the last year or so that we've seen this hiccup in the economy. So the manufacturers like Tesla and definitely Rivian are finally having a downturn that they have to deal with. So it's not, we pick a number and we hit that number now. And companies like Rivian are doubly in trouble because their early business plan is based on venture capital, on people investing in this company because it's a good investment and they hope it to be the next Microsoft or Apple or Tesla. And the fact that the industry is tightening up because of the economy, and the fact that interest rates are going up. Now it's more expensive to invest in things. So Rivian is no longer the investment worthy thing that it was just 2 years ago. And Rivian has always been one of the better investments in the EV sector because they had a decent product and they didn't have pie in the sky targets. The fact that they missed it by 2% shouldn't be a big deal, but it's the stock market, and it is.
Okay, but so here's my question. So if General Motors missed by 2% or Ford missed by 2%, I mean, certainly over the years, this probably happens a lot, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But General Motors and Ford and everybody else has a track record of profits. So a year that they don't hit their profits are fine. This is a startup, and you're basing your entire investment on how often they hit their targets. And if they miss this target, well, now suddenly they're not as desirable as they were last month. And so the stock price has been going down for a year. It's going to take another hit here.
Okay, but this is purely a business case. This has absolutely nothing to do with the quality or the build of their vehicles.
They're just having trouble getting parts at the moment. So they're a little behind the numbers they want.
And Sam, I would also argue, and I hear this a lot from auto people, it is pretty hard to build a car that first time. Rivian's they may have some struggles, they may have some challenges, but they're doing a pretty good job doing something for the first time that's really hard. Tesla, hit numbers early, but they had a little bit of practice through the years and had some slow ramp ups and some, this is Rivian really getting into the game from volume production, and that's a big step. So
absolutely. Yeah. When you look at the history of American production, how many car companies have started since World War II and been relatively successful? And there's Tesla. So it is a very tough market to break into, and cars are complicated. You just can't decide you're going to build one in your garage and start building 100,000 tomorrow.
And they're doing it during a crazy semi-chip market and all kinds of things. So kudos to them for trying. Also, realistically, it's a tough job. They may or may not make it, but it's a tough job.
I think it's interesting that they added a second shift here in Q3, right? So yes, they missed their target, but they're certainly pushing in the right direction and also focusing perhaps as well, deciding not to build, electric commercial vans, right? Or pausing those plans. So it seems like at least that leadership is making the right moves to keep Rivian moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So Brett, sticking with the pickup truck theme that Jenny started us off with, see, it just keeps running through. So another startup company, Lordstown Motors. Now, Lordstown Motors had gotten the General Motors Lordstown plant for a song or less. and they were going to be building their endurance pickup truck. Well, it turned out that due to some financial issues, Foxconn had to come in and take over the plant. Now Foxconn is building the Lordstown endurance pickup truck, and everybody seems to be excited. Oh, Foxconn is building this truck. Oh, Foxconn is building this truck. And okay, so I'm going to put you in the box as being the manufacturing guy. So here's a company that is known for making iPhones and Kindles, not pickup trucks. Why are people excited about this? And what does Foxconn bring to the party besides a checkbook?
So Gary, I actually used to do education and training programs at Lordstown in the mid 90s and had a lot of interaction with that plant. So I go way back with that plant. It's a crazy group of folks there. It used to be, and now it's a little different. Foxconn, remember this. So there's a couple of different directions I'll go with this. But first is Foxconn doesn't just assemble iPhones. They actually have manufacturing of components and such in China. So they've been building pieces of cars, and even more than just pieces of cars. They do some of this already. So it's not like, hey, first time ever we've done this. They have some experience. But I take a different direction as well. On a monthly call with KeyBank and some other folks. Trevor Upton hosts it, a good friend, but it brings together automotive folks and the tech industry folks and some really brilliant people from the tech industry. And they really question whether Foxconn has the chops to lead this, what's the new phrase, software-defined vehicles, which is, I think, the next catchphrase. We can forget about automated vehicles and electric vehicles. It's now software-defined vehicles.
We got more of the show to do. We're not going to forget about those two types of vehicles. Just want to warn you.
Yeah. Okay. Good thing. But as you look at it, Foxconn is kind of that interesting spot where they're trying to create their own operating system. They're trying to create their own manufacturing system. They do bring some unique things. But again, I go back and talk to my friends in the industry that have spent decades in the tech industry, and they think, boy, that's a big leap for Foxconn. But it does start to show how a software-defined vehicle might be different than a traditional automotive vehicle.
I guess I wonder whether the Lordstown Endurance truly is a software-defined vehicle. I mean, they wanted to build a robust pickup truck that would be used for commercial applications, and I think that many of these commercial buyers probably don't care all that much about the ability to get over-the-air updates and things like that. But that could be just me.
I think you're absolutely agree with that, but I think it's starting that step or that process or how Foxconn fits into this. We've talked for several years about this idea of, does a EV become just a rolling laptop? And I think the answer is probably not soon, but I think it does change the dynamics of who owns the value and who's controlling that product.
I think it might be sooner than you think. The rolling laptop, the rolling iPhone, it's right around the corner. It's not that far off. And as you said, the Lordstown truck was designed before Foxconn got in here. Foxconn has its own technology that they'll bring in, and being a contract manufacturer allows startups to come in and Foxconn to come in and offer some more services, potentially buying the data, having access to the data in those vehicles. It's a good leap forward for Foxconn to get into this field, which is software defined.
It is, Sam, and I think for those of us in the industry that watch it, it's just a fascinating moment to see if this truly does shift who has that power. We've been talking over the last couple of years, and Gary, you're right, we'll come back to battery electrics, I'm sure, but does a battery electric vehicle shift the value add to the battery companies instead of the vehicle manufacturers? Does the software-defined vehicle shift it to Apple or to Foxconn instead of the vehicle manufacturers? All great stuff going forward this year and next.
Well, so let's take the EV part first, and so you're going to sort of skew this, Jenny, because you do have that EV in your driveway, but so the research firm Morning Consult recently reported that 17% of all Americans are interested in buying an EV in the next 5 years. Okay. That number a year ago today was 20%. So it's declined by 3%. The group most interested in buying EVs are millennials, and they came in at 22%. They're the ones who are 27 to 42 years old. And when asked about why people are disinterested, 60% said price. Okay. So the first thing I put to you guys is, what does this, what I would describe as being tepid interest in EVs, say about the tremendous amount of investment that the industry is making in EVs? Anybody?
I'm going to let Jenny, who talks directly to the customers.
That's a great question. I mean, you think about where a lot of automakers put their effort. They tend to start with luxury and it trickles down, right? The technology starts in luxury and it trickles down to then the more affordable mass consumer type of vehicles. They're testing it out, right? And so with the EVs, it seems like, we know last year, I think the average price for a new EV was $65,000, right? And an ICE car was $48,500. And so, that's a huge difference. Then let's layer on top of that inflation, rising financing rates, right? It could not, this could be something where, yes, the interest level has gone down, but there might be more affecting sort of that individual consumer's pocketbook and their thinking when it comes to an EV than they're letting on. That could be part of it too. And of course, there's always the home charging aspect. That's a whole additional hurdle that shoppers need to think through, and additional cost as well.
Gary, we do, for 20 years now, we've tracked announced investment in North America. That's the vehicle manufacturers telling us what they're going to invest in terms of manufacturing and assembly facilities. This year, they announced $47 billion, and that was through November, so I don't know if anyone had made any announcements in December. But of that $47 billion in announced investment, I believe over 44 billion was in EV related or electrification related stuff. That doesn't necessarily match up with the number you just told us of 17% interested in buying EVs. And I think it's a really, really interesting dynamic going forward as we look at these companies that have truly said, this is the future. This is where we're going. How do we get the consumers there? And Jenny, you mentioned that the charging infrastructure is not anywhere near ready. How do you get that ready in a couple of years or 4 or 5 years even?
I think it's so interesting. My husband was out driving with our EV the other day and saw a line of Tesla owners waiting to charge their vehicle at a public station. And I live in the city of Chicago. So, right, public charging can be a little bit more of a difficulty, and home charging as well. So I think we're going to see a lot more strain on the public charging as people have jumped into EVs with perhaps not thinking enough about the home charging solution as they should. And so we may hear even more squawking and concern, as we're in this really uncomfortable transition between EVs and ICE.
At the beginning of December, we had a workshop out in San Ramon, out in Silicon Valley area, on EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure. And it was interesting to hear folks involved in it from a depth, a very in-deep position, talk about how this is really coming to the forefront. And it was curious because after that dinner that night, I walked out into a parking lot and there was a Tesla charging. And the guy was in the back, kind of cuddled up. It was a cold night out there. He was reading his book and charging for 30 minutes in a Tesla, which Tesla has phenomenal charging infrastructure. They've done a great job. But even then, my first thought was, would I want to be sitting in a Tesla in my car in a parking lot for 30 minutes charging? It's just a different dynamic. And it's, again, not a bad different. It's just different. And getting those people that aren't comfortable with it is going to be a challenge.
I think part of the problem is the pricing. That a year ago we were all waiting for these inexpensive electric vehicles to come online, and they just haven't reached there yet. They're coming, and as you pointed out, that we're talking a good 30% more expensive for an EV over an ICE. So if you're already having problems with $48,000 for an ICE and it's over 60 for an EV, that's a large hurdle to get past. We're just at the cusp of EVs. General Motors has promised a $30,000 Equinox. There's a $40,000 Blazer coming. We're promised all these inexpensive EVs. As soon as they come on the market, and as soon as people actually see them on the market, I think that number will go up dramatically, and you'll see 25 or 30% of people looking for their next vehicle to be an EV.
Okay, but this, Sam, that argument is predicated on these vehicles coming out being less expensive. And I thought it was sort of interesting that General Motors announced, and this sort of didn't make much in the way of waves, that remember they decreased the price of the Chevy Bolt, and now they've increased the price of the Chevy Bolt, right? So, you've got that. And so I've long been skeptical that we will see a $30,000 electric vehicle from General Motors.
Not arguing with that, but we will see less expensive models.
Yeah. And so according to Bloomberg NEF, which tracks things like this, that they found that the lithium ion battery packs, and this is the nickel, metal, manganese, cobalt variety, were up 7% in 2022. The cost was up 7%, the first rise in a decade. And there was like an asterisk on this, and it said that it would have been higher if the LFP batteries, which is the lithium iron phosphate, which are less energy dense, if that started gaining some traction. So this was like, oh, here's an option. We can put in these less efficient batteries. So the thing I wonder about is that if the battery pack price is up 7%, isn't 2023 sort of a momentum year for people to begin to get into EVs? And isn't it possible that this may be an inhibitor to that happening?
Yeah, but it's a chicken and the egg thing. We have to make more batteries. The prices will come down as you make more batteries. You have to get more mining of materials. There's a lot of things that have to come in. We've had 130 years of ICE industry here, and we've only had roughly 10 years of EVs. There's a lot to go on here yet that hasn't happened. And once we get the economies of scale going up, you won't see the 7% rise in cost of one particular product. We'll see them normalize. We'll see the whole industry roll out so that everything in the industry goes up roughly the same amount every year, and it won't be as costly.
What do you think, Jenny? Do you think that ever rising prices will make people skeptical?
I mean, there's a lot going on. It's not just EVs where prices are rising. It's across the board, right? And you also are dealing with limited supplies. So when you're talking about new cars, there perhaps is a little extra bump in what you're going to pay just to get that vehicle. So I think that there's kind of been an affordability crisis. Not crisis might be too strong of a word, but an affordability issue going on in automotive for quite a few years. It was just more on the new car side, but let's be honest, it's on the used car side too. So it's across the board. And I think what's going to be really interesting is, how long, when are these, sorry, I'm changing the question on you, but we'll roll with it. But,
I would change it on me too.
Just going to take this over. But when are we going to see used car prices really truly come down? What are all these people who are waiting in the wings and have been waiting in the wings now for several years going to do? There's just so much going on. We're never going to go back to normal. I don't think we're going to return to normal. I think we're just going to have to evolve from all of these various crises that are affecting the automotive market and affecting pricing.
Jenny, part of this discussion is going forward this year, and the points you bring up are so challenging. Yes, there is an easing of the supply chain issues, sort of, mostly, maybe. Probably not, Sam, for lithium and some of those things in the near term, but over time, potentially. we see inventories getting built up, right? And we're starting to finally see that. As we see a recession, does that mean that the car companies will start to cut the prices? All of a sudden, we start to see those vehicles not getting a premium. I think we're already at that point. Do we start to see discounts on those vehicles coming forward? Or because people have been waiting, like my wife who just bought a new car a couple of weeks ago, but she waited over a year and a half to get it. There's a lot of people waiting. Is that going to keep those prices up, which will keep the profits up and keep the average transaction price up? It's a really curious time to watch this, because it's a real opportunity for the companies to prove that they will not go back to the old ways of just putting money on the hood to move things out of the plant. And yet,
Well, it would be interesting to know what those inventories are, and I have a suspicion those inventories probably are of very well loaded vehicles that people cannot afford to buy right now.
That easy eyeball test is you drive by a lot of dealerships, and for the first time in 3 years, you see pickup trucks on the lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
platinum editions, not work trucks. All right, we got to take a quick break. Hear from our friends at Bridgestone, and we'll be back. We got plenty more, and Jenny will change all of my questions, and they'll be better for it.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on what roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
And we are back. So at the top of the show, I mentioned that John is out at CES. And so CES, formerly known as the Consumer Electronics Show, until they decided, gee, if we change our name, that consumer electronics folks won't be the only ones here. And lo and behold, auto companies and automotive suppliers have gone to CES, and they've made great hay out of it. The aforementioned Chevy Bolt was not introduced at the North American International Auto Show. It was introduced at CES, and then the week later it was brought to Detroit, which just goes to show you that GM said, we're a tech company, we're not a car manufacturer, and we're going to put the vehicle out there. So at this year's CES, there are approximately 275 companies that are related to the auto industry. And near as I can tell, approximately 275 of these companies are all talking about their autonomous technology, which Brett said we weren't going to talk about, but we're going to talk about it.
I lied again.
So, okay. So, big news last year was the fact that the combination that Ford and Volkswagen had gotten together for Argo AI, and they said, we're not seeing much of a future for this thing, and we're gonna get rid of it. But I mean, my inbox is just constantly filled with releases about technology, sensors and systems on a chip and all kinds of vision and LiDAR and radar and on. So, Jenny, do people want autonomy in their vehicles?
Good question. Ooh. Yeah, wait, Jenny, don't change that question. That's a good question.
I'm just going to kick it right to you, Brett. I think they think they do. They think they do, right? I think we see autonomous features, right? There are various features that are getting us toward an autonomous vehicle. I do wonder if people are really truly ready to give up the control of being behind the wheel and the fun of driving a vehicle. On the other hand, sometimes I'm ready for us to make that move over when I see people on their phones and not really paying attention as they're driving. So, it's really tough to say. It does seem like the interest in it has decreased slightly, but Brett, what do you think about it?
Can I change that question? So look, we've been doing quite a bit of work in this space over the last just 6 months, because it's something that we've seen some will talk about an AV or maybe an AI winter in terms of investment. There's just been not a lot of announced investment in this space. That happened from 2012, maybe through 2017, 2018, when a lot of promises were made and frankly, promises were not kept. But you see, I think, two very different camps right now. You see a camp that really still believes in this, and you can probably put Tesla, Waymo, and Cruise in there. But you see a lot of others that are starting to step back and say, well, maybe there isn't quite a near-term return on this. Certainly Ford, VW with Argo AI was one of those that you can, from a distance, say they look and don't see an easy return. I also see people changing the definition of level 4, which is this idea of where can it be used as an automated vehicle, fully automated vehicle. It used to be from, it could be in any big city or in your area, to now they're saying, well, we can really reach level 4, but it may only be in 4 or 5 streets in a college town or something, and therefore we've got our success. We've got our automated vehicles. So there's, I think, a lot of pulling back in terms of what it can do. But gosh, Gary, I listened to John McElroy from week to week, and John's still pretty convinced it's going to happen. So maybe John knows something. It's a challenge. It's really hard. And when I talk to the folks in the AI space, they look at me and say, "You don't realize how hard this is." And when I talk to the people in the sensor world, they say all we need to do is put more sensors on the vehicle, but that may not be the answer either. So there are believers and there are non-believers, and it seems more and more there are becoming near-term, mid-term believers.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. This is a lot of technology that needs to be all put together. The technology, the sensors, and all that stuff is necessary for all the autonomous things that we have in vehicles, lane keep assist and braking and all the other things that will get us to level 4 and level 5. But the idea that we're going to get there right away is so far-fetched, because there's so much that has to be learned. When you drive a car, and I tell people this all the time, when you drive a car, there are so many things that you do automatically that you have to teach a computer how to do. Noticing that the tire on that car in that other lane is turning slightly towards your lane, that means he's coming over into my lane. These are things that we do automatically that we actually have to figure out a way to teach a computer how to do. It's a lot of work to do to get us to that next level. But I think a lot of these companies thought that it was around the corner until they started doing that research and realized what a hurdle this was to get over. We'll get there eventually. And Jenny, to your point, I remember watching people read books on a steering wheel. Okay. So I'm waiting for the autonomy so that they can get off my street.
So Sam, so a couple of things there. It's interesting. And again, going back to the work we did this past fall, we've all seen the different levels, the SAE levels, and level 5 is that go anywhere, anytime, any place kind of thing. It was interesting this fall, a lot of the so-called experts or those working in the space said, we don't use level 5 anymore. It's not possible. I mean, people aren't even level 5 realistically. So how do we define that level 4? And getting to that level 4 is really tricky. As you point out, it's a lot of nuance. And Gary, maybe you remember, I think up at Car MBS about 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago, a Toyota executive used the, and I'll paraphrase it, and I don't remember exactly, but he said, look, getting to automated driving is 97% easy, but we can get to 97%, but you've got to get to 99.99 something. And his argument then was, and Tesla or Toyota's been pretty strong and steady on this, is it's really hard. And that last few percentages is turning out, as Sam said, to be pretty darn hard to do. And it's not surprising. It's,
it occurs to me is you guys mentioned that, you need more sensors. And so yesterday, a new car company, Sony Honda Mobility, introduced the Afeela. And one of the features of the Afeela was that it has, wait for it, 45 sensors on it. Okay, 45. And, and it occurs to me that, we're talking here a lot about, price sensitivity. I mean, all of these things are not cheap. And so what does that do to the equation?
Yeah, the price.
Everyone laughs.
Yeah, the price is definitely going up on everything. But it wasn't that long ago that a camera cost a fortune, and now we see cameras everywhere. As this technology gets smaller and cheaper, you're going to see it just spread across everything. And we're already seeing it. We had an accident with our minivan a few years ago, and the bumper has a ton of sensors on it.
Yeah.
And we just scrapped them and got new ones. I mean, it has become that ubiquitous that they're just everywhere.
So there's the decreasing cost, and the auto industry and the tech industry is great at getting scale. It's something they've done forever, and they're very good at it. But there's also this in life and repair challenge. All of those sensors have to be monitored, have to be corrected, have to be fixed. I remember just before the pandemic, riding in a Lyft or an Uber, I forget, with a gal, and she had a Subaru EyeSight or Outback, which had EyeSight, which at the time was a great system. It still may be, but at the time it was great. But she said, I'm having trouble with, not something you want to hear when you're sitting in the back of a car with someone driving. She said, I'm having trouble with my EyeSight. It doesn't seem to stop well enough. We started talking, and she had a cracked windshield. She lived out in Colorado, and Colorado is famous for cracked windshields. And she had her windshield replaced, and they put a new windshield and posted the mirror back up there, and the sensors weren't set correctly. And it wasn't a terrible job. I think it was just, it's hard to do, and you've got to take the time to do that. And working with the SEMA and the aftermarket folks, not everybody that repairs stuff is going to make those sensors work right. And so when you start to talk about something automated, maybe it's a fleet, because you've got to have that maintenance. You've got to have that upkeep, at least in the early stages.
So speaking of fleets and things like that, I found an interesting quote from Herbert Diess, who up until last summer was running Volkswagen, and then he was basically told, "There's the door, and we'll see ya." So he describes himself on his LinkedIn profile as being, quote, on a mission to shape new mobility and stop climate change. This is what, if you're a car company executive, this is what your next act is, of course. Anyway, so this is a quote from Herbert Diess. "Mobility has to be more radically invented, they say. True! Exclamation point. Too much industry bias and probably a too nostalgic view on cars. Too many SUVs, even electric ones, and too much car ownership while not thinking far enough about changing values, priorities, sharing, and mobility demand in general. Also true." Okay, so here's a guy who ran what was arguably the largest car company in the world, now saying, maybe those SUVs are not a good idea. Maybe people buying these cars are not a good idea. It doesn't matter if they're electric or not. Is this just sort of like a guy saying, I've got to present myself differently, or is there something to it? I mean, it's just like, you mentioned, Brent, maybe it needs to be a mobility service rather than a personal ownership for an automated vehicle. I mean, is there going to be a change, or are we just going to continue on the path we're on right now?
So I can start this, but sometimes I may sound negative or doubting new technology. But Gary, I know that there's, at least I'm not the most negative or most on the panel. But
it's Jenny is number one,
yeah,
so you can tell.
But look, there are some really interesting niches and some opportunities for these things to start and grow, and I think those models are important. They may not be as effective in the U.S. In the very short midterm, but these technologies, and I say this when I think about, I'll go to the battery electric vehicle, the automated, and even this whole message of software-defined vehicles, are all moving in a wonderful pathway with great opportunity. But it's going to take a village. Can I say that? It's going to take the consumers to buy this and buy into it. And I don't think a lot of American consumers have that interest. And he said it's the right thing to do. I think a lot of them would disagree.
Jenny, cue you on that.
So I think that's really interesting. And Brett, you're saying a lot of Americans you think don't have the interest in that. And I would agree if you're looking sort of at perhaps like Gen X and older. Mm-hmm. But I wonder about Gen Z. right? I mean, we're just starting to figure them out. There's a lot to learn, and I have a couple in my house right now, and I'm certainly no expert on them, but I think given how prices continue to increase on car ownership, given their focus on climate and concerns around that, perhaps they are the generation where we see that shift. I have no idea, right? And that might only be in cities, for instance, rather than in more suburban, exurban, rural areas, right? So there's also those considerations.
I spent a couple days in Manhattan, and I'd be absolutely thrilled to see no cars except for automated electrified vehicles in Manhattan. There are certain places that absolutely make sense.
Yeah, no, big cities like Manhattan are perfect for people to not own a car. And I had a story years ago where I met a woman who was in charge of the automotive section of a magazine, and we asked, "Oh, how did you get this job?" Well, they asked around the room. The magazine was based in New York. They asked around the room who has a driver's license, and she was the only one who raised her hand, so she became the automotive editor. New York is perfect for that kind of thing. But against your point about Gen Z, I also have some Gen Zers in this house, and while they grew up with me as a father, so they're always around cars, but they didn't necessarily want a car, and now that they have come of age, a car is definitely part of their life. I would have trouble seeing their generation giving up cars quite yet. As a lifelong automotive enthusiast, I've always seen the car as an inherently dumb idea. Personal transportation for one person to get everywhere when trains would work fine with it. I'm not about to give up my car, and I'm not expecting anyone else to either. But the idea of it will take a long time. And like I said, we've been doing this for over a century. And before that, it was horse-drawn buggies. Nobody was going to have mass transportation of horse-drawn buggies then. They're not going to do cars today, and especially Americans. Americans are really tough to get out of their cars.
Well, speaking of cities, to be fair to Herbert Diess, he's now seems to be interested in a vehicle called the City Transformer, which was introduced at the recent Paris show. It's a city vehicle with a top speed of 56 miles per hour, a range of 112 miles, a length of a whopping 99 inches, and its width changes whether you're in city mode or performance mode. And if you're in performance mode, it goes to a whopping 55 inches wide, seats too. So anyway, so Sam, I want to ask you something. As I said earlier, I mean, you are tracking production numbers, and AutoForecast Solutions has the future of vehicles that are going to be built and where they're being built and how many are being built and so on. And one of the things that occurs to me, I mean, we were talking earlier about the Foxconn at Lordstown, and Magna is going to be building vehicles for Fisker, and there are other contract manufacturers that are involved. What happened to this? And then Brett had said 47 billion are being invested in production capacity. What happened to global overcapacity? That there were too many factories, and now there seems to be more.
Global overcapacity was an ICE thing. It was an internal combustion engine thing, and now we absolutely have an overcapacity online and coming, because companies are building brand new plants for these EVs, and a lot of the factories are set up to make an ICE, and they don't make an EV as efficiently. So they're just building new EV plants to build those efficiently. It's leaving us with a lot of added capacity, plus the fact that the extra capacity we've always had has been from startups. If you look at China, all these manufacturers who came in with 100,000 unit plants or 200,000 unit plants, and they built 40 or 50,000 units. And so there was a lot of overcapacity there, because that country was going to come online and everybody was going to win. And we know how that works. Mm-hmm. But in North America, in Western Europe, in Asia, you have a lot of these startups who are coming online and building that capacity for 50 or 100, hopefully only 100,000 units of capacity. When you have companies that come online and said, we're going to build 20 million vehicles in the next few years. first of all, you don't have the capacity, and second of all, that's going to take you 10 times what you have now.
And Gary, remember that number that I quoted earlier is investment in not just in assembly plants, but in basically building a completely new infrastructure for manufacturing of batteries and electric motors, at the expense of now having excess capacity in engine plants, transmission plants. So it's not an assembly issue at this point. It's replacing.
But I mean, it's basically the manufacturing operation that's getting the money, whether that is, for making battery packs or whatever. It's not saying, okay, we're going to be building out chargers everywhere.
No, but you're building battery capacity. You're building assembly capacity. You're building everything else that we need to build EVs. It will just increase on paper, the overcapacity, but it's needed in order for the industry to grow.
Mm-hmm. So Jenny, I want to ask you, there seems to be changes happening now in what are expected of dealers. Ford has this, you can be a Model E certified dealer, or you can be a Model E certified elite dealer. General Motors is talking about more, shopping online, fixed pricing. What do you see happening in this space? And is there going to be a significant difference, say, in the next 5 years in the way a consumer is able to get a vehicle?
Great question. I mean, we certainly saw a lot of changes. COVID, for better or for worse, brought in a lot of changes when it came to car purchasing, right? It suddenly went from, this going to dealership after dealership, and sort of doing the legwork to really embracing being able to have, video conferencing to look at a car online without having to go in. Now that's dialed back a little bit, right? As we're adjusting to sort of the way life is today. So there were a lot of changes early in COVID around purchasing a vehicle. I think what's important when it comes to dealers is this is such a major purchase, and people still want to have that connection to dealerships. Not everybody, certainly not Tesla owners, but I think that they need that connection. And then also you're driving around this incredible piece of technology and finding the service side of things. If you have an EV, for instance, you're not going to be getting as much service, but you are going to still need service, and you're going to need very knowledgeable groups to deal with. And so, I think the dealership still has a role in the ownership process in that life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Brett, so I asked Sam about the plants. I asked Jenny about dealers. I got nothing for you, but
here's to those two.
Here's what I want to ask you first, and then the other two I want you to chime in. Okay. So I've been asking you all various and sundry questions. What do you think we should be talking about in the remaining minutes of this show?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a fun one. So I think there are two or three things. I think, this time last year, most of us could spell Ukraine, but really didn't understand that dynamic and what it could do to the industry. I think that's going to happen. I would suggest that Taiwan and China, that dynamic is one we still get most of our chips from Taiwan. There's a whole lot of things happening in that political sphere that I don't understand, but I'd worry quite a bit about, at least keep an eye on. I think it's also going to be, again, there's so many things, but I think if we see the production supply chain free up a bit, companies are going to start to be able to build vehicles. I'm really anxious and interested to see if there will be companies that really maintain that discipline and want to limit production to keep the transaction price high. And if several do it and one doesn't, and one says, we're going to start building and selling at a deal, what does that do to the rest of the dynamics? Because that will not cure the affordability issue, but it will certainly change the profitability issue.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a great point. The movement currently towards making more money, having less inventory, less negotiation, all that stuff is great. And the industry says this is the new normal. We're going this direction. Well, capitalism is capitalism, and dealers are going to have one more car than their next guy over, who's going to return by having another car on top of that one. So we're going to see an expansion of inventory. We're going to see lowering of prices. Right now, because of the part shortage and the chip shortage, manufacturers are building the high-end vehicles, and that's just pushing the average price up further and making the choice lower and pushing people towards used cars, pushing their prices up further. We're going to need more parts and more vehicles as they trickle down into the $30,000, the $40,000 vehicles instead of the $180,000 vehicles. That we're going to see more and more of those, and dealers will bring back inventory, and we'll see a little more negotiation. It won't get back to where we were 3 years ago, but we'll get somewhere better.
So real quick, Gary, if I could, Sam, the fact that you used trickle down to what a bargain at $40,000 tells us how crazy this last couple of years has been in terms of pricing.
Yeah, if you saw the cars in my driveway, you would understand that $40,000 is not on my radar.
I just got rid of a 15-year-old car, and it took
The last car I bought was $200. So,
okay,
wow,
I'm not there. I thought I was pushing it, but not there.
If I were to answer, so my answer to that question would be keeping an eye on what's going on with used wholesale prices, and then what we're seeing, of course, used car inventory pricing as well, and sort of that gap. We know that wholesale prices are dropping. How quickly or when will we start to really see some relief for used car shoppers? One of the most popular searches on cars.com, of course, are for lower priced vehicles. People are looking for maybe not $200 cars, but they are looking for cars that are more like $10,000, right? $15,000, even $20,000. And it's you can find them, but what you're getting today versus what you would get, 2 to 3 years ago, it's really not the bargain anymore. And so trying to reset the used car market somewhat to make that a better arena for people looking to spend a lot less money.
So if to that end, if people are looking for lower price vehicles, doesn't this bode well for the likes of, we started the show talking about Hyundai, Kia. I mean, they still have comparatively inexpensive cars. Honda's still building cars, and Civic's more expensive than it used to be, but it's still somewhat affordable. Toyota's got a range of cars, including the Corolla, which was the best-selling compact car, for years running now. So doesn't this put them in the catbird seat and perhaps put the companies that have said we're not going to do cars anymore, cars are not important, and everything is an expensive SUV or pickup truck? And if your readers or viewers are saying, hey, we want something cheap, they may lose out. Anyway,
cars are getting better. They're lasting longer, which is why used car prices are up. I mean, it was just a few years ago that I'm looking at 10-year-old cars that are $20,000 and $25,000. I remember it wasn't that long ago that once a car hit 100,000 miles, it wasn't worth anything, and now we've got 150,000 mile Toyotas bringing reasonable money for a car. It's a lot going on, and we have a lot of companies trying to get enough parts to make those cheap cars. If I have a set number of parts, I'm going to put them in the expensive stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying, Sam, is that, okay, if you're a company that can make a $25,000 car, that you're in a good spot, perhaps, that somebody's going to be saying, hey, I want to buy a car and get a good warranty for it, and therefore I'll buy this Hyundai Accent, right? Which is less than 25 grand, versus a company that no longer has capacity to do that.
I don't think anyone's arguing that there are people who want to buy that car. I just think there are just happen to be a lot of people. I don't know who they are, but there are a lot of people out there who can afford to buy an $80,000 pickup truck. And I'm going to make money selling an $80,000 pickup, a lot more money building an $80,000 pickup truck than I am a $20,000 Corolla.
Yeah, and if you don't have the volume of the more inexpensive vehicles, right? So that's a volume play. So those might come roaring back as we see some of these, supply constraints start to loosen. That would be, in my opinion, a great move, because if you're shopping for a used, some of the guidance we give used car shoppers, it's like, look, if you hit a certain number, you need to go start looking at new, because you're right on the threshold. And if you can get a new car for the same amount of money that you were considering a used, shouldn't you just get the new car and get the warranty and the new technology and whatnot? So, yeah, it's all about that volume play. Can they produce enough of these vehicles to get the margins that they want to get?
Mm-hmm. All right, Brett, final word. We're at the top of the hour.
So I'll close it out with this thought, is these two are talking about great stuff. I used to do education programs at the GM plants, Ford plants, Chrysler plants, others. And I showed a slide that showed the average age of U.S. cars, or the median age of U.S. cars. And it was early 2000s, and it was about 7.5 years. That's up to 13, I don't know, Sam, 13, 12 and a half, 13 years.
Yeah.
That's, the auto industry is making some remarkable stuff that can go a long way, and that's important. The corollary was that I would show, this wasn't my doing, it was our old friend Gary Sean McElendon put this in there, but the median age of marriages at that time was 7.5 years, and cars were lasting longer than marriages. Now they're lasting twice as long as marriages. There's some really well-built stuff out there for after sales.
A quick point on the average age of cars. If the average age of a car is pushing 13, and we're selling 15 million brand new vehicles, that means there are a lot of cars out there that are 20 years old or older on the road today.
Yeah, which is pretty darn good build.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of $200 cars.
because I know that everybody that watches or listens to the show depends on accuracy. It's 12.2 years according to S&P.
That's fair.
So I just want to.
So thank you. I appreciate that. I knew it was above 12, but I didn't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Jenny Newman, Sam Fiorani, Brett Smith. This has been a great show. Disinterested saying that, but I want to. Right.
I was going to say, as you can see, my lights went out a long time ago. So
this has been great, and let's do this next year. The same discussion, and so happy New Year to you all, and thank you for watching us, joining us, listening to us, and John will be back next week. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
If you like this program and would like to learn more about the automotive industry, check out our website at autoline.tv or look for us on YouTube on the Autoline channel.